My name is Victoria. I am 34 years old, and if you saw me on a typical Friday morning in Chicago, you would see a woman who looked like she had it all figured out. I am a professional event planner, the kind people call when they have more money than sense and need someone to turn a hotel ballroom into a fairy tale. But beneath the tailored black blazers and the expensive espresso, I was a woman running on fumes, fueled by a promise I made 5 years ago to a man who isn't here anymore. When my husband passed away, he didn't just leave behind a grieving widow, he left an 11-year-old daughter named Hazel who looked just like him, and a legacy of hard work that I was determined to protect. I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have a wealthy family to fall back on. All I had was my grit and the insurance payout that I had carefully locked away in a trust fund for Hazel's future. That money was sacred to me. It wasn't just currency, it was her father's final gift, his way of making sure his little girl was taken care of even when he couldn't be there to walk her down the aisle or see her graduate. For a decade, I built my reputation from nothing. I started in a cramped studio apartment with a laptop and a phone, and I turned it into Chicago's premier luxury event planning agency. I handled the egos of billionaires and the tantrums of celebrities. But the one thing I couldn't handle was the guilt of my own mother, Diana. My mother is a woman who believes that blood covers a multitude of sins, especially when those sins are committed by her favorite child, my older brother Bradley. Bradley is 36, 2 years older than me, but emotionally, he's stuck somewhere in middle school. He spent his life chasing shadows, jumping from one failed tech startup to another, always with our mother's hand in his back, pushing him forward and cleaning up his messes. 6 months ago, Diana came to my office, weeping. She told me Bradley was at his lowest point, that his last business had collapsed, and he was sinking into a deep depression. She begged me, on the memory of my late father, to give him a job. She said he just needed a title to feel respectable again. So, against every instinct in my body, I made him the chief financial officer. I told myself it would be fine. I would handle the real work, and he would just look at spreadsheets and feel like a big shot. I gave him signatory rights to the accounts, because I wanted to prove to my mother that I could be the good daughter for once. I wanted to stop being the villain in her story. The day everything collapsed started out as the pinnacle of my career. I was at the Four Seasons Hotel, organizing the wedding of Senator Williamson's daughter. It was $1 million affair. The ballroom was a sea of white orchids, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of people who appear on the evening news. I had been on my feet since 4 o'clock in the morning, ensuring that every single detail was perfect. The scent of expensive peonies was so thick you could almost taste it. I was mentally checking off my list, thinking about the massive commission from this event. It was going to cover my mortgage for a year and add another significant chunk to Hazel's college fund. I was exhausted, my heels were killing me, but I was proud. I felt invincible. I looked at the crowd of senators and socialites and thought about how far that little girl in the studio apartment had come. I just had to make one final payment to the wine distributor before the champagne started flowing, and then I could finally breathe. I walked over to the back service corridor, away from the hum of the string quartet and the laughter of the guests. I saw Harrison, my wine distributor for the last 7 years, waiting with his portable credit card terminal. We were dealing with vintage Chateau Margaux, imported directly from France. The total was $45,000. It sounds like a fortune to most people, but in this world, it's just the cost of doing business. I pulled out my American Express black card, that heavy titanium rectangle that felt like a shield in my hand. It was a symbol of my success, proof that I had made it despite everyone telling me I would never amount to anything after my husband died. I handed it to Harrison with a practiced, confident smile. He swiped the card. A sharp, high-pitched beep echoed off the concrete walls of the hallway. Harrison frowned, adjusted his glasses, and swiped it again. He muttered something about the hotel's Wi-Fi being spotty. Beep. The second time, the sound was louder, more aggressive. It wasn't the sound of an approval. It was the sound of a rejection. Harrison looked at the small screen, his face turning a pale shade of gray. He looked at me, and for the first time in 7 years, he didn't look like a business partner. He looked like a man who was suddenly very worried about his own bottom line. He told me the card was declined for insufficient funds. I felt a cold prick of annoyance. I told him that was impossible, that the account had a credit limit of $500,000 and a cash balance that could buy the hotel. I told him to run it manually. Before he could even press a button, the heavy service door swung open, and Mr. Preston, the hotel manager, stepped out. Mr. Preston is the kind of man who wears a three-piece suit like armor and treats everyone below his tax bracket like a nuisance. He had seen the red light on the terminal. His voice was like a razor blade. He told me that he couldn't have a scandal at a senator's wedding. He said that if the vendor costs weren't settled in exactly 5 minutes, he would halt the entire service. He threatened to walk into the center of that ballroom, tap the senator on the shoulder, and inform him that his daughter's wedding planner was a fraud and the wine was being repossessed. I felt the heat crawling up my neck, a violent flush of humiliation that made my vision blur. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I told them it was a fraud alert, a glitch in the bank system. But as I opened my banking app, a deep, primal sense of dread began to settle in my gut. I stared at the loading wheel, bargaining with God, promising anything if the screen just showed me my balance. I didn't wait for Mr. Preston to say another word. I pushed past him and ran down the service hallway until I found a small, cramped utility closet near the freight elevators. I threw myself inside and locked the door, the smell of industrial-strength bleach and damp mops filling the air. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, the cold concrete seeping through my dress. My MacBook was in my bag, and I ripped it out, my fingers fumbling as I typed in my credentials. I mistyped my password twice because my hands were trembling so violently. When the dashboard finally loaded, the air left my lungs completely. It felt like someone had physically reached into my chest and stopped my heart. Business operating account, $0.00. Payroll account, $0.00. I frantically clicked over to the sub-accounts, my mind screaming that this was a mistake. My personal savings, the money I had set aside for our next vacation, the money for Hazel's braces, gone. But then, I clicked on the one account that I considered untouchable. The irrevocable trust fund for Hazel. The one I had built with her father's life insurance. That account was supposed to be her future. It was supposed to be the one thing in this world that was safe. The balance read, 0. A strangled sound escaped my throat, a mix of a sob and a scream that died in the cramped space of the closet. I forced myself to look at the transaction history. There was only one entry for today, timestamped at exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, just as I was coordinating the florist's arrival. Outgoing wire transfer. Amount, $1,240,000. Recipient, a Cayman Islands Shell Corporation. Authorized by Bradley Miller, CFO. The name felt like a brand on my skin. Bradley. My brother. The man I had hired to appease my mother. The man I had tried to save. He had used the digital signatory rights I had entrusted to him to wipe me clean. He didn't just take the profits, he drained the liquidity. He took the money meant for the vendors, the money for my hardworking staff's salaries, and he took every cent meant for his own niece's education. He had committed a financial execution. Panic began to set in, not as an emotion, but as a physical attack. My peripheral vision went dark, creating a tunnel effect. My skin went cold and clammy. This wasn't just theft. This was an assassination of my life. He had left me with nothing but massive liability and total humiliation. I slammed the laptop shut, the anger finally overriding the fainting spell. He had a 2-hour head start. I needed to move. I didn't go back to the ballroom. I couldn't face the senator, Harrison, or the sneering face of Mr. Preston. I sprinted out of the hotel service entrance, tossed the valet a $20 bill I found in my pocket, likely the last $20 I owned, and tore out of the parking garage. I drove down Lakeshore Drive like a maniac, weaving through the heavy Friday afternoon traffic, ignoring the angry honks and the speed cameras. My mind was racing. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he moved the money to protect it from a hack. Maybe he was at his apartment right now, waiting to tell me it was all a big misunderstanding. I reached the luxury high-rise building where I paid $4,000 a month for his rent. I ran past the concierge desk, not even checking in, and took the elevator to the 30th floor. When the door slid open, I sprinted down the hallway to Unit 30B. I expected to pound on the door until my knuckles bled, but I didn't have to. The door was already unlatched, swinging slightly in the draft from the hallway air conditioning. My stomach dropped into my shoes. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, bracing myself for a confrontation. The apartment was gutted. It wasn't just that Bradley was gone, everything was gone. The 75-inch television I had bought him for Christmas was missing, leaving nothing but a rectangular dust outline on the wall and a tangle of ripped wires. The expensive sound system, the Italian leather sectional sofa I had spent $5,000 on, all of it was gone. He hadn't just packed a bag, he had hired movers. This was a calculated, cold-blooded evacuation. The floor was littered with trash, empty pizza boxes, and crumpled beer cans. I walked into the master bedroom, ripping open the closet doors. Empty. Not a single shirt, not a single pair of shoes. I stumbled into the master bathroom, my reflection looking pale and ghostly in the vanity mirror. That's when I saw it. A neon yellow sticky note was plastered right in the center of the glass. I reached out and peeled it off, recognizing his jagged, rushed handwriting immediately. It was written with a thick black marker. I read the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Victoria, consider this my severance package. For 30 years, I've lived in your shadow while you played the perfect golden child. You have the business, the reputation, and the trust. Now I have the cash. Don't bother sending the police. Kelsey and I have done our research on non-extradition countries. Enjoy the cleanup. I read it twice, then a third time. Severance package. He justified grand larceny and robbing his widowed sister as a business transaction. He viewed my daughter's future as his personal payout for his own insecurity. A scream ripped through my throat, a raw, primal sound of pure betrayal that echoed off the marble tiles. I crumpled the note into a tight ball and threw it at the mirror. He was gone. He was really gone, and he had taken the snake, Kelsey, with him. I was standing in the wreckage of my own generosity, holding a piece of paper that had cost me over $1 million. I drove straight from Bradley's gutted apartment to my childhood home in Oak Park. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight I thought I might snap the plastic. I needed to tell my parents what had happened. I needed them to know that their golden boy was a criminal. I burst through the front door without knocking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The house smelled of lemon polish and potpourri, that same suffocating scent of perfect family that I had spent my life trying to live up to. I found my mother, Diana, in the master bedroom. She was humming a quiet tune, calmly folding silk resort wear into a large designer suitcase on the bed. She didn't even look up when I slammed the door against the wall. I screamed at her. I told her Bradley had emptied the accounts. I told her he took $1.2 million, including Hazel's trust fund, and that he and Kelsey had fled the country. I waited for her to drop the blouse. I waited for her to grab her phone, to weep for the destruction of my life, to tell me she would help me. Instead, Diana placed a silk sun hat into the suitcase and reached for a scarf. She told me to stop shrieking because I was giving her a migraine. And then she said the words that made the floor drop out from under me. She said, "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Victoria. Bradley called me yesterday. He said he finally found a business opportunity that suits his talents. He just needed a little startup capital. You have so much, and you never share. Why are you being so selfish?" Selfish. The word hit me like a physical slap. I looked at the suitcase, the designer clothes, the sun hat, and then I looked at the vanity. There, sitting next to her jewelry box, was a crumpled piece of heavy cardstock. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. It was a boarding pass stub. Emirates Airlines. First class. Chicago to Dubai. One way. The date was for today. But the name on the booking reference wasn't Bradley's. It was a ticket purchased using a credit card ending in the 4 digits of my mother's personal account. I held the ticket up, my voice barely a whisper. I asked her if she booked it. I asked her if she financed his getaway while he was robbing her own daughter. Diana finally stopped filing her nails. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed that she had been caught. She snapped at me, saying Bradley needed a fresh start and that I was suffocating him by making him report to me. She actually believed that stealing my daughter's future was a seed investment for her favorite child. I told her she was sick. I told her she was an accomplice to a felony. I grabbed the boarding pass and told her I was taking it straight to the FBI, that I would report a federal wire fraud and list her as a co-conspirator. I told her she might be joining her son in a cell. The slap was so fast I didn't see it coming. The crack of her palm against my cheek echoed through the bedroom like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side, and a stinging heat blossomed across my face. I stumbled back, touching my cheek in shock. My mother hadn't hit me since I was a child. But the look in her eyes wasn't motherly, it was pure, unadulterated hatred. She stepped into my personal space and hissed that if I said one word to the police, if I did anything to jeopardize her son's future, I was dead to her. She told me she was ashamed she had ever given birth to me, calling me a jealous, bitter woman. I looked past her to my father, who was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, staring blankly at the garden. He had heard everything, the theft, the slap, the threat. And he did nothing. He didn't speak. He didn't turn around. His silence was louder than her screaming. He had chosen his side, just like he always did. Get out! Diana screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the hallway. She told me I wasn't welcome there anymore, to go back to my empty life and leave him alone. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, and physically shoved me toward the stairs. I didn't fight back. I felt numb, operating on autopilot. I walked down the stairs I had climbed 1,000 times as a child, past the family photos that were all lies, and out the front door. She slammed the door behind me, and I heard the deadbolt slide home. It was the sound of a final severance. I walked to my car, my legs feeling like lead. I climbed into the driver's seat and locked the doors, shutting out the world. I sat there for a long time, staring at the garage door. My cheek was throbbing, but the pain in my heart was worse. I was 34 years old, and I was officially an orphan. I had no money. I had no family. I had no support system. I wrapped my arms around the steering wheel and rested my forehead against the cool leather, realizing I was completely and utterly alone in a city of 3 million people. Before we continue with Victoria's incredible survival and revenge journey, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you live in right now. Every comment and interaction helps spread this story to more people who believe that justice will ultimately be served. Thank you so much for being with me. The drive back to my own house was a blur of tears and red taillights. The Chicago evening had turned cold and rainy, matching the hollow feeling in my chest. When I pulled into my driveway, I instinctively pressed the button on my garage door opener, but the heavy oak door remained stubbornly shut. I pressed it again, harder this time, as if brute force could override the electrical grid, but nothing happened. I stepped out of the car, confused, until I looked up at the porch and saw that the motion sensor lights were dead. The smart security system keypad was a lifeless black circle. My heart sank. My utility bills were set to autopay directly from the business operating account. The bank must have rejected the electric company's request hours ago, immediately triggering a remote shutoff. It was the first physical sign of my new reality. I was officially destitute. I let myself in through the front door using the spare physical key I kept hidden under a planter. The house was pitch black and freezing. The thermostat, usually glowing a warm orange, was dead. I fumbled my way to the kitchen drawer, my fingers brushing against cold granite until I found a box of emergency candles and a lighter. The flame flickered to life, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls of the home I had worked so hard to build. I sat at the dining room table, the single candle providing just enough light to see the screen of my laptop, which was running on its last 20% of battery. I wasn't looking for a solution anymore. I was looking for an exit strategy. I opened a new document and typed the words that felt like nails in my own coffin: petition for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. My fingers trembled as I filled in the preliminary fields. Assets, 0. Liabilities, $1.5 million. I was about to sign away my reputation, my credit score, and the legacy my late husband had left for us. I felt like a failure. Not just as a businesswoman, but as a mother. I had let a wolf into the sheepfold because he shared my last name. Tears dripped onto the keyboard, blurring the legal jargon. I was so absorbed in my self-hatred that I did not hear the soft footsteps on the stairs. "Mom?" The small voice cut through the silence. I quickly wiped my face and slammed the laptop shut, trying to hide the evidence of our ruin. I turned around to see Hazel standing on the bottom step. She was wearing her oversized flannel pajamas and clutching the ragged teddy bear her father had given her when she was 3. In the flickering candlelight, she looked so small and fragile. I had planned to send her to private coding camps and Ivy League schools. Now, I didn't even know if I could keep the lights on for breakfast. I forced a smile, though it felt like a crack in a porcelain mask. I told her the power was just out because of the storm, that she should go back to bed. But Hazel didn't move. Her gaze was unnervingly steady. She walked across the room and stopped right in front of me. She didn't ask about the power. She didn't ask why I was crying. She just stared at me with an intensity that made me hold my breath. Hazel leaned against the dining table, her dark eyes reflecting the candle flame. "You're crying because Uncle Bradley took the money from the Green app, right? The business one with the tree logo." My heart stopped. I had never discussed the specifics of my banking apps with her. I stared at her, wondering how much she had heard or seen. I nodded slowly, admitting that yes, Uncle Bradley did something very bad and the money was gone. Hazel didn't blink. She hugged her teddy bear tighter, but her voice was clinically detached. "He didn't take the money, Mom," she said calmly. "He thinks he did, but he didn't." I knew he was going to try, so I changed the guts of the app before he could touch it. I stared at her, wondering if the exhaustion was finally making me hallucinate. I thought she was playing some kind of pretend game to make me feel better. I reached out to smooth her hair, telling her that real life wasn't like her video games. But Hazel took a step back, looking annoyed. She explained that her father had taught her how to inspect elements and modify source code before he died. She reminded me of Tuesday night, when Bradley and Kelsey came over for dinner. Hazel said she saw Kelsey secretly recording my hands as I typed my password. "I didn't lock him out because he would have just forced you to open it," she explained. So, when he went to the bathroom that night, I went on his laptop. I created a sandbox. I wrote a script that overlaid a fake interface on his browser. When he logged in today, he wasn't looking at the bank server. He was looking at my simulation. I shook my head, my mind struggling to process what she was saying. Sandbox. Script. Simulation. It sounded like a movie plot. But looking at the fierce intelligence in her face, I felt a tiny spark of hope. She explained that she had moved the real money, all $1.2 million, into a triple-secured escrow account on Thursday night. She used the emergency protocols her father had set up for her trust fund. "He made the transfer, Mom," Hazel said, pulling a tablet out from behind her back. "But he didn't transfer dollars. He transferred pixels. I routed his request to a dummy server. He thinks he's a millionaire, but he's actually flying to Dubai on a credit card that has been maxed out since yesterday morning. I gave him exactly what he wanted to see so he would leave us alone and get on that plane. If he had failed at home, he might have gotten violent. This way, we're safe, and he's the one in trouble. I looked from the iPad to my daughter. She wasn't just a child. She was a fortress. While I had been begging for my family's approval, she had been building a firewall. The realization that our money was safe brought a wave of relief so strong I almost collapsed. But as Saturday morning broke over Chicago, the practical reality set in. The money was safe, but it was locked in a high-security escrow that required a 48-hour verification period because of the fraud alert Hazel had triggered to protect it. On paper, I was wealthy. In reality, I had $0 in my pocket and the electricity was still cut off. I walked into my walk-in closet, a space filled with the trappings of the success I had spent a decade building. My eyes landed on my orange Hermes Birkin bag. It was worth $20,000. Today, it was just a lifeline. I grabbed it and drove to a high-end consignment shop on the Gold Coast. The transaction was humiliating. The owner, a woman I had known for years, looked at me with thinly veiled suspicion. I lied and said I was shifting to minimalism. She offered me $4,000 in cash, a fraction of its value. I took it without negotiating. As I counted the $100 bills in my car, I felt a new kind of shame. I was selling pieces of my identity just to keep the lights on and buy groceries. But the financial pain was nothing compared to the professional wreckage. By Saturday afternoon, my phone began to ring with resignations. The rumor mill in Chicago was faster than light. Word had leaked that my cards declined at the senator's wedding. My lead coordinator, Sarah, didn't even call. She sent a text message saying she couldn't afford to work for free and was taking a job with my biggest rival. She was taking my client list and my secrets with her. I wanted to scream, to type back that I had the money, that this was all a sting operation. But Hazel warned me against it. If I denied the rumors publicly, Bradley might hear about it and realize something was wrong before he tried to spend the fake funds in Dubai. I had to play the role of the bankrupt victim perfectly. So I typed back a simple understood and watched my empire crumble one text message at a time. Through it all, Hazel was the eye of the storm. She sat in the passenger seat of my car, wearing her school uniform and a pink backpack, looking entirely normal. But she was wearing a single wireless earbud, and I knew she wasn't listening to music. She was listening to the ping of a global positioning system locator. "He just landed," she said quietly as we pulled up to a grocery store. "He's at baggage claim. The signal is strong. Just act sad, Mom. If anyone asks, we are ruined. Don't break character." Sunday night in Chicago was heavy and suffocating. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Hazel was curled up on the rug with her iPad propped against the coffee table. She had not moved for hours. I was dozing off myself, exhausted from the crying and the stress, when the room suddenly changed. The soft white light of the screen vanished, replaced instantly by a harsh, pulsating crimson glow. It washed over the living room walls like an emergency flare. Hazel sat up instantly, her eyes wide and alert. The iPad was screaming a low-frequency alert tone. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto the text scrolling across the screen. It was a clear, undeniable sentence: transaction attempt detected. Amount, $50,000. Merchant, the Royal Atlantis Resort. Location, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Hazel's fingers flew across the glass keyboard. "He just tried to book the Royal Bridge Suite," she whispered, her voice steady and clinical. "That's the most expensive suite in the entire hotel. He's not just trying to spend money, Mom. He's trying to spend a fortune in a single swipe." I stared at the number. $50,000 for one night. That was more than my staff's monthly payroll. The sheer arrogance of it made my blood boil. He was throwing away my daughter's future on a gold-plated hotel room just because he thought he could. "The ghost server just received the request," Hazel said. I am forwarding the handshake protocol to the real banking network now. The trap is sprung. The merchant is waiting for approval. We sat in the dark, watching the red dot on the map. Because the real account was empty, the second the hotel tried to verify those funds, the system would trigger a level 5 international fraud alert. It wouldn't just decline the card, it would flag the location for the local authorities immediately. Suddenly, my iPhone, which had been sitting face down on the coffee table, began to vibrate violently. It was a high-pitched ringing that cut through the tension. I flipped the phone over. The name on the screen made my stomach lurch. Bradley. And below his name was the icon for a FaceTime video call. He's calling me, I whispered. He's trying to spend $50,000 and he's calling me at the exact same moment. Hazel looked at the phone, then at me. He wants to gloat, Mom. He thinks the transaction went through. He wants to see you cry while he drinks champagne. Answer it. You have to keep him on the line so he doesn't leave the hotel before the police arrive. Act destroyed. I took a deep breath, messed up my hair to look more disheveled, and swiped the green button. The connection chime pinged. The video feed stabilized, and the brightness of the Dubai sun nearly blinded me in my dark living room. It looked like a travel commercial. Bradley was standing on a sun-drenched balcony with the iconic sail shape of the Burj Al Arab Hotel gleaming in the background. He was wearing a white silk robe and holding a thick cigar in one hand and a crystal flute of champagne in the other. "Hello, poor sister," he drawled, blowing smoke at the camera. "I hope you're enjoying the Chicago winter. It's 80 degrees here in paradise. I just wanted to call and personally thank you for the donation. This is the life I was always meant to live. No bosses, no schedules, just pure liquidity." I forced a sob to escape my throat, playing the part. I begged him, telling him that was Hazel's college fund, that he was destroying us. Bradley threw his head back and laughed. "Oh, stop whining, Victoria. You can always make more money. You're the responsible one. You're the worker bee. I'm the talent. And frankly, I deserve this. Consider it back pay for all the times Mom praised you instead of me. I'm going to eat gold leaf steaks while you clip coupons." Suddenly, Kelsey shoved her face into the frame. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a diamond necklace. She held up a bright orange designer handbag. "Hey, sister-in-law," she chirped. "Do you like my new bag? It's a Birkin. It cost $20,000 at the airport. Your money bought this. It matches my nails perfectly, don't you think?" She posed with the bag, kissing Bradley on the cheek. My hands were shaking so hard I had to set the phone on the table. The rage was rising inside me like acid. I wanted to tell them that the private elevator was about to lead them to a jail cell. I wanted to tell Kelsey that the bag was evidence, not an accessory. But I bit my tongue. I looked over at Hazel. She was staring at her iPad, watching the progress bar of the transaction approval. She held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. The trap was armed. All we needed now was for the hotel to finish processing that $50,000 charge. Bradley was in the middle of describing the yacht he planned to charter when a thunderous pounding on the hotel room door interrupted him. The sound was so loud it made his champagne glass tremble. He rolled his eyes at the camera, annoyed. "Hold on," he grumbled. "It's probably the concierge with the caviar I ordered. These people are obsessed with serving me." He walked across the marble foyer and swung the heavy door open with total arrogance. But it wasn't a waiter. Through the shaky video feed, I saw 4 men. 2 were in the dark green uniforms of the Dubai police. The other 2 were large security guards flanking a man in an immaculate black suit, the hotel manager. The manager didn't bow. He stepped into the room, forcing Bradley to retreat. "Mr. Miller," the manager said, his voice like ice. "We have a problem. The card you provided for the $50,000 deposit has been declined." Bradley laughed, a harsh sound of disbelief. He told the manager it was impossible, that he had over $1 million, and he turned the phone screen toward the manager as if I could verify it. The manager ignored the phone. "Sir, the card issuer has not only declined the transaction, but they have also flagged the account for suspicious activity. We cannot host you here. You need to settle the bill for the champagne and vacate immediately, or we will involve the authorities standing behind me." Bradley turned a shade of red that clashed with his white robe. He grabbed the credit card terminal from the manager. "Give me that. You obviously don't know how to run a black card. Watch this, Victoria. Watch me buy this whole floor just to spite you." He jammed the card into the reader and smashed his pin into the keypad. I held my breath. Hazel was typing furiously on her iPad, keeping the ghost server active just long enough to deliver the final blow. Beep. A long, flat tone of failure. The screen flashed, declined. Bradley ripped the card out and jammed it back in. Beep. Declined. He swiped it. Beep. Declined. Code 05. Do not honor. The blood drained from Bradley's face. He looked at the card like it was a snake. "This is a mistake," he stammered. "I saw the numbers. 1.2 million. The manager signaled the officers. "In Dubai, attempted fraud is a serious criminal offense." As the police stepped forward, Hazel reached out and took the phone from my hand. She propped it up and looked directly into the lens. "Hello, Uncle Bradley," she said. Her voice was a razor blade. Bradley froze, blinking at his niece. Hazel leaned back and said, "The transfer never happened. You saw a simulation. I spent the weekend coding it. I call it the Greedy Uncle edition." The silence in the Dubai hotel room was absolute, broken only by Bradley's ragged breathing. He stared at the 11-year-old girl on the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "A demo?" he whispered. Hazel held up her iPad so he could see the lines of code. She explained that when he entered his password, he was logging into a local sandbox she hosted on the guest Wi-Fi. He had been playing a video game with pixels, while the real money was sitting in a locked vault in Delaware. "You've been flying around the world on a credit card that has been maxed out since yesterday," Hazel said. "You have no money. You have no leverage. You just have a bill for a luxury suite you can't pay." The police officer grabbed Bradley's wrist, and the metal handcuffs clicked shut. The sound echoed all the way to Chicago. Bradley struggled, screaming my name, begging me to wire the money. I looked at him and felt nothing but cold clarity. "You did this to yourself, Bradley," I said. "You booked the flight. You booked the suite. I'm just the spectator." As the police began to march him out, I saw movement in the background. Kelsey was still there. She wasn't looking at Bradley with love or concern. She was looking at him with pure disgust. The second she realized there was no money, Bradley was no longer an asset, he was a liability. She adjusted her grip on the orange Birkin bag and stepped forward. She didn't offer a hug. She pulled back her leg and delivered a vicious kick to Bradley's ribs with her designer stiletto. "You bastard," she screamed. "You told me we were set for life. You dragged me to Dubai for this? You're a broke loser." Kelsey turned to the police, instantly shifting into a victim act, claiming Bradley forced her to come and that she knew nothing. But as she played the damsel in distress, she made a move for Bradley's fallen wallet. She ripped my father's gold Rolex off Bradley's wrist, hissing that it was payment for her wasted time. She fished out his passport and his emergency cash, stuffing the money into her bra. Bradley howled as she took his identity, realizing he was now a ghost in a foreign land with no name and no way home. Kelsey gave a cold, conspiratorial nod to the camera and walked out, leaving Bradley alone in the desert with the vultures. The guard reached out and cut the feed. The screen went black. It was over. The adrenaline that had fueled me for 72 hours evaporated, leaving me physically weak. I pulled Hazel into my arms, and we sat in the dark, crying with the shaking relief of survivors. But Hazel pulled back, her eyes hard. It's not over yet, Mom. We stopped the thief, but we haven't stopped the person who hired him. She was talking about my mother, Diana. The next morning, the deceptive peace was shattered by a violent pounding on my front door. It was Diana. She was unraveled, her perfect hair windblown, her eyes wild with rage. She shoved past me, screaming that the consulate had called at 3 a.m. She yelled that Bradley was in a detention center and it was all my fault because I was too greedy to share. She demanded I list my house for sale by noon and wire the cash to Dubai to bail him out. She threatened to burn my house down with me inside it before she let her son spend another night in prison. Before I could respond, Hazel walked in. Diana lunged at her, calling her a little witch and raising her hand to strike my daughter's face. My body moved before my brain. I intercepted the blow, catching Diana's wrist and shoving her backward into a chair. "Do not touch my daughter," I warned, my voice low and dangerous. I picked up the TV remote. I reminded Diana that she had begged me to install high-definition Nest cameras in her house last year to watch over my father. I turned on the TV and loaded the Cloud app. There, in 40K resolution, was the video from Tuesday afternoon. It showed Diana handing Bradley a thick envelope of cash and his passport. We heard her voice clearly, "Let Victoria freak out. She has plenty of money. Just get to the airport." I paused the video on her face. I told her that was called aiding and abetting a fugitive, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I gave her the choice: walk out and never speak to us again, or I would send that clip to the FBI and she could join Bradley in a cell. Self-preservation 1. Diana's arrogance severed. She walked out into the sunlight, a lonely, defeated figure. I closed the door and heard the deadbolt click. For the first time in 34 years, the house felt entirely mine. Bradley spent 240 days in a Dubai detention center. He lost 20 kilograms and his skin turned yellow. When he was finally deported, he thought the nightmare was over. But 6 federal agents were waiting for him on the jet bridge at O'Hare. The digital footprint Hazel had preserved was irrefutable. He was indicted on 20 counts of credit and bank fraud. The judge saw no reason for leniency and gave him 15 years in a federal penitentiary. The golden boy was finally tarnished beyond repair. Kelsey didn't escape either. When she tried to breeze through U.S. Customs with that stolen Rolex and the orange Birkin bag, her fingerprints triggered a red alert. She had an outstanding federal warrant for smuggling and trafficking counterfeit goods from 3 years ago. She was led away in shackles, realizing she was just another piece on the board that had been swept away. In Oak Park, my father finally found his spine. After seeing the footage of his wife laughing about defrauding his daughter and giving away his retirement watch, he filed for divorce. He froze all the assets, and the judge, seeing the evidence of Diana's complicity, awarded him everything. Diana was evicted from her throne and ended up in a state-subsidized care facility, sitting by a window and telling strangers she was a victim. I never went to see her. I blocked her number, the facility, and anyone who tried to speak for her. I was an orphan by choice, and it was the best decision I ever made. 1 year later, I was sitting on the teak deck of an overwater bungalow in the Maldives. The sun was warm and golden, casting diamonds across the water. My business hadn't just recovered, it had thrived without the toxic drain of my family. Hazel surfaced from the water, her face glowing with a healthy tan and the carefree spark of a child who no longer had to be the adult. I looked at her and realized that family isn't about shared DNA, it's about who stands in the breach with you when the walls are falling down. Bradley and Diana were my history, but Hazel was my future. We were a small army, just the high of us, but we were invincible. I learned the hard way that you cannot save people who are determined to drown you just to stay afloat. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. Never let blood bind you to those who bleed you dry. Cut them off so you can live. Looking back at the wreckage of what used to be my family, I don't feel an ounce of regret for letting them destroy themselves. But society always tells us that family is everything and that blood should be forgiven unconditionally. So tell me, Am I wrong for refusing to save them when I had the chance, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button to hear more stories like this, and don't forget to like and share.